Okay, I was given a list of questions and I chose only the ones I wanted to, the ones I thought I could answer, just the easy ones. The first question, of course, is my absolute favorite question. I love it when people ask me that. How can we find your books? How can we buy all your books? That's a wonderful question. How can we find your papers and all that? It's actually very interesting because I'm not writing any books anymore. No more books. Because nobody can buy them. Because they're too expensive. I cannot afford to buy copies of my own books, even when I get author's discount, because they're much too expensive. In US dollars, textbooks can run at least $40, $50, $100, $200. The same thing is true with journal papers. The journals cost a lot of money. So all of these things have risen in cost. And in reaction, something very good has happened. I found out about this from my son, who is a mathematician. In the field of mathematics, one of the world's best mathematicians, his name is Timothy Gowers, he's from the United Kingdom, and he's a specialist in algebraic geometry, and he's the winner of the Fields Medal. The Fields Medal is like the Nobel Prize in mathematics, only for people under 40. They let these children get the medals. Anyway, he decided to declare war on the publishers. He is boycotting. He is not subscribing, not contributing, not reading articles in several of the big journals, mostly journals published by Elsevier, because the prices are too high. His logic: we, the professionals, do all the work. We write the articles. We comment on the articles. We help authors revise the articles. We get nothing, and the publisher makes all the money, 100% of the profit. Also, if you want to get a copy of a single paper, it costs $40 American usually, and the author doesn't get the money, the publisher gets the money. Now, I did a little bit of investigation and I found out why this is true. The publishers, and several of them told me this, they have what we call a captive audience, people who must buy their products, and this is university libraries. If a new book by Timothy Gowers or Noam Chomsky comes out, all the university libraries have to buy it, and it doesn't matter how much it costs. And if the books are so expensive that if they only sell 200-300 copies, the publishers make plenty of money. So that's what's going on. This is actually a very bad thing because it means that only professors at very high-ranking universities can read the research. You have to be at a university with an excellent library and have privileges at the library so you can take out books, so you can get papers downloaded. Everything else you can't have. It's too much money. It's too expensive. Well, I don't think this is right, and I'm part of a movement. You may call it socialism if you like. And that says that there's something called the common good. There's some things that society should pay for and make sure everybody can profit from it. And scientific knowledge is one of those things. I heard a speech last night by Angela Davis, very interesting, professor of philosophy. And she says the philosophy now is anything that you can make profit from, you should make profit from. And that's not the way society can run. We have to be concerned with the common good. So here is the new policy. I am now in favor of what is called open access. And I think this should apply to all scientific knowledge. If someone comes out with a vaccine for the COVID virus or a cure for cancer, it should be available to all scientists throughout the world, absolutely for free, open access. It's not for sale, it's for the common good. So we are doing this. I'm doing this, and a number of people from other countries are doing this. We have declared our work to be open access. So when I write an article, it's free to the reader. The publisher doesn't get paid. The journal doesn't get paid, and they're published on the internet. If you go to my website, sdkrashen.com, D for David, or you look at my tweets, or you look at ResearchGate, you can see my papers and the papers of many, many, many of my colleagues. We're doing this now. Lots of people are no cost, free download. Do not ask permission, just do it. Open access does not mean anything gets published. The articles are still reviewed, some are rejected, so there's still standards. But it's open now to everybody. The answer to the question, you want my stuff? Go look at my website, sdkrashen.com. Go look at ResearchGate and take a look at my posts on Twitter, TWITTER, and a lot of other people are doing this. We've made several other changes. We think that articles published today are much too long. A wonderful quote by a scientist named Lichtenberg, who lived around 1760. He said, when you ask the time, you don't want to know how watches are constructed. All you want is the time. And all the research papers you read and I read are always telling us how watches are constructed. People are publishing their dissertations. So these so-called quality journals have 30, 40, 50-page articles. I don't have time to read these. You don't have time to read these. We wind up just skimming it and missing crucial information. So I think it's a very dangerous way. Articles that I write and my colleagues write are short. One famous example, one of my favorite papers, is the article by Crick and Watson on the double helix DNA. And it turned out to be a very simple diagram, a very famous diagram. The article was very clear, 2 pages. You can find it, you can download it for free, and you then know what Crick and Watson discovered and why it's important. So we want short introductions. You don't have to include everything you know. We want short conclusions, and we want it freely shared. There's another point I want to make about publication today. We want to avoid academic language. By that, the expression is gibberish. I don't know if that's spelled with a J or a G. It keeps changing. Gibberish means just making something much longer and more complicated and incomprehensible than it has to be. A very famous anecdote tells the story. Sometimes gibberish gets much more respect than clear articles. This happened at my university, the University of Southern California, in the medical school about 30 years ago. A group of junior professors were asked to organize lectures on teaching medicine to medical students. And they got a script, they wrote it out, and they hired a professional actor to give the talk. The professional actor had been on television and the movies, and he was what we call a class 2 actor. Wasn't a famous star, but very, very good, very competent. Nobody knows his name, but people recognize him because he's been in all these shows, movies, TV shows. And he always played the part of a doctor. So he looked professional. He gave a stunning performance. The script they gave him was complete nonsense. It didn't make any sense, contradictions, but fancy charts, mathematical equations. The faculty voted it the most outstanding talk of the entire year. Nobody understood it because there was nothing to understand. So that, unfortunately, is how we react sometimes. If I don't understand it, it must be wonderful. It must be profound. People sometimes also publish complicated things because they're hiding something. If you have an opinion that's unpopular and you don't want to be criticized, write a long, complicated paper. The paper will get published, you'll get academic credit, but you'll take no risk because nobody's going to understand it. I learned about this when I was a graduate student. When I was a graduate student, one of my faculty members was a man named Peter Ladefoged, who was a professor of phonetics. And because Ladefoged was a member of the Acoustical Society, we all joined, and it was very inexpensive. and we all went to meetings at the Acoustical Society and presented paper. Professor Ladefoged gave his paper, I remember, and he said that, you know, the committee met last night and we decided that people shouldn't give 20-minute papers. We're going to limit it to 7 minutes. He said, I know this doesn't go into effect next year, but I like the idea, so I'm going to give my paper in 7 minutes. He did it. And because time was short, his paper was completely comprehensible. No long conclusions, no long discussion. He said, this is what we did, this is the data, this is what we think it means. He got more criticism than anyone I have ever heard at a conference because his paper was comprehensible. People understood it, therefore they could criticize it. So if you want to, his paper was brilliant, I thought. If you want to avoid criticism and you want to feel good that you've published a paper, make it long and complicated and you can hide your ideas from the critics. Well, I think there are a lot of advantages to short papers. I'm so glad you're letting me talk about this. This feels good. I think there's a lot at stake here. The future of the profession, really. Number one, saves time. Reading short paper, wonderful. I can sit down, as you can, and in a couple of hours, I can read 10 papers if they're 2 pages long. And I would understand everything the experimenters did. But if I have long papers, I could spend an hour and understand nothing. It saves money. They're free, ladies and gentlemen. They cost nothing. It saves space in the journals. My favorite journal for many years was one in psychology called Perceptual and Motor Skills. It was always fun to read. Each issue, about that thick, contained about 40 or 50 papers because they were all 2 pages. They were all clear. And you could understand an enormous amount of research in just a couple of hours, which meant there was more space. Now in our field, I will name names, I don't care. If you pick up the journal Applied Linguistics, if you pick up the TESOL Quarterly, each journal contains maybe 5 papers because that's all the room they have in a printed journal. So this way, there's no limit. You can have 40, 50 page papers in a journal and still keep it short, still no problem. You don't have to look through all this stuff. So this is a very, very good deed. If you're on a committee, I've been on all these committees, and you're supposed to review candidates. We have to review new faculty members to read their research, and we have to evaluate our colleagues to see if they're ready to be promoted. Well, you really should know their research. You can't. The papers are much too long, much too complicated. If we use this method, in 2 hours, you will understand what a colleague does. So this is a huge, huge time saver. It also gives us more time to do what we call authentic labor. There is nothing more boring than writing a literature review to show the reader that you've actually read everything. Nobody cares. Cite the articles that are important for your study, and that's all. I'll give you my experience with this. About 6 years ago, I started a new policy. I'm asked to review articles quite frequently in a variety of journals, and I really take this seriously. It's an obligation. Other scholars have reviewed my papers. I feel obliged to review theirs, keep the quality level okay, etc. I then put a limit on it. 5 years ago, I stated this. I said, I will not review any papers that are longer than 5 pages. I have not reviewed a single paper since that time. I am sent papers that are 40, 50, 60 pages. I say, no, I'm not going to do this. I tell them why. I was hoping to cause change, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping you'll help me with this. So Yes, go ahead.
By the way, just a little comment about what you said about writing short 3 papers. We are trying to apply your ideas concerning writing short papers. And we are trying to encourage people, researchers, educators, to apply your ideas, because I found them very interesting, because people are tired of reading long pieces of papers are tired of reading a lot of gibberish, as you said, a lot of
Yes.
details which are not important. We are trying to do this. We are trying to encourage this in Morocco, at least in Morocco. We are trying to encourage people to apply your ideas, Krashen's ideas, in terms of writing research papers. And I think they are wonderful.
There are problems. The biggest problem is that faculty will not respect these short papers.
Of course.
So it's a slow change. It's going to change, I think, when senior scholars do it. And a few of them are. And then it will have an effect. So I'm very happy people are doing it in Morocco. That's wonderful. Keep up the good work.
Yes,
Okay.
because we need this. We need this.
Otherwise, it's impossible. We can't work. There's too much to read. And I do work in 5 or 6 different fields. And it's very hard to keep up if they write long papers. Okay, we will change the world and reduce suffering. This is our job.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay, the next topic came up a good question, and it's so good I really can't answer it, but I'll try. If we want input to be not only comprehensible, but also compelling, very interesting input, how do we do it when our students have different interests? I can't solve that problem, but I can solve a related problem that'll make things a little easier. I think we can easily expand students' interests so they have more in common. Beniko Mason, my colleague in Japan, has been working with a method of beginning language teaching based on stories. She calls it story listening. She uses stories of universal interest, Grimm fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm, stories that she says have stood the test of time, stories with universal themes. This is a huge step, I think, in the right direction, fairy tales, legends, etc. For more advanced levels, after you've been listening to stories and your language competence is intermediate, the secret of success, I think, is self-selected reading. Reading that you decide. If you have self-selected reading, you then have a very good chance that students will find it interesting and comprehensible. It's been shown that good readers know they have the right to not read a book. If they read the first 2 pages and they don't like it, they know they can put it down. That's the attitude we want to have, okay? We want compelling texts. I don't like it when people recommend books to me. When someone gives me a book as a gift, I feel guilty unless I try to read it. It's assigned reading. And most of the time, I don't want to read it. I read the first 2 pages and I decide this isn't for me. And I feel guilty. Garrison Keillor, American humorist, author, says he has a whole shelf of gift books, things that people have given him. He was an English literature major at the university, so he gets all these classics, the Bronte sisters, early Shakespeare, and he feels guilty. He feels the books are staring down at him, and he hasn't read any of them. Books must be self-selected. I have one exception to this. There's one person, when he recommends a book to me, I always read it, and he's never wrong. And he's the only one. And that's my son, because he knows what I should read and he knows what I'm going to like. And he knows me better than I know myself. And we always have 1 or 2 people in our lives like that if we're fortunate. But in general, gift books, we don't like it because it's assigned reading. The research shows self-selected reading is much, much more powerful. Much more powerful in terms of increasing reading comprehension, knowledge. All the research shows that. Well, we also know a great deal more about reading. As I mentioned in my last talk to you, we know that reading self-selected reading not only gives you grammar, vocabulary, all these things, far better than instruction. It also gives you knowledge of a wide variety of topics, of subjects. So we learn more as we read. There are ways of answering this question by taking the advice of a colleague and very good work. Her name is Donalyn Miller. She's a former middle school teacher in Fort Worth, Texas. And she was teaching English language arts, and she solved a problem beautifully. The school board she was working with, the district, had a list of topics that she had to cover. All English teachers got this. Like, you must do historical fiction. You must do biography, okay? What she did, she didn't select the books. She told her students, we're going to do biography for the next 3 weeks. Your assignment, find 3 biographies and read them. They can be biographies of anybody. You can do Barack Obama. You can do Justin Bieber. You can do anyone you like. So the students would come in. The class as a group had read like 50 biographies. And Donalyn Miller says the class discussions were very, very rich and stimulating. Her requirement for the students, her expectation, was that the students would read 40 books in a semester. That's a lot for an 11, 12-year-old child, okay? But they did it. The average number, 55. They read what they had to read, and they read absolutely more. So we can link subject matter teaching to fiction reading. If you're teaching about World War I, ask the students to read 3 books about World War I or whatever, and they'll all be slightly different. They'll stimulate interest in knowing about the history. Another idea comes from a colleague, English teacher from Santa Monica High School. She's the president of the National Council of Teachers of English, very creative teacher. In her high school, what they did was every English teacher had a classroom library with books that that teacher liked. So if you like historical fiction, her classroom library would be filled with historical fiction. If you like legal novels, like John Grisham in English, that teacher would have lots of legal novels. So the students all through the school knew that each teacher had their own tastes, and they were free to visit other teachers' classrooms. So, okay, I want historical fiction, I want romance, I'll go in to Mrs. Jones' classroom, and Mrs. Jones was always very happy to see you. And you would borrow books from Mrs. Jones. The students got to know what other teachers were like, and it was a good literacy progress. One more idea. All these ideas, notice, are simple and inexpensive. They cost absolutely nothing. This next one is my all-time favorite because it requires a pencil or a pen, and that's all. No software, no computers. At this high school, there's a lady named Adrians who published this in the school library journal. She told the students in the high school that if there was a book that they liked that was in the school library, she invited them to take the book and draw a star, circle it on the inside cover. That's the whole method. So someone coming into the library would take a book down and find a book with 30 stars in it. They would get curious about the book. The star method worked. Cost maybe $2 to buy a pen, and you're part of the system. This is what I would do with individual differences. I would try to expand student choices, gradually get them interested in more things, take advantage of the power of other teachers, colleagues, the possible marriage between fiction and subject matter. Okay, that's number 2. The next question had to do with teaching grammar indirectly. I'll give you a quick answer and then give you more. Indirect is the only way.
Implicit.
It's the only way in town. It's called implicit, through acquisition, not conscious learning. The studies we have show that this is the only way it can happen. You have to teach grammar implicitly, which means you absorb it through reading. Grammar is too complicated to do any other way. You can only teach the simplest rules. You can't teach 99% of the grammatical system. If you go up to the greatest linguist in the world, still Noam Chomsky, he knows more about English than anyone alive. He knows more about English than anyone who has ever lived. If you ask him, what percentage of rules do you know of English? He would say a tiny amount, fragments, maybe 10%. The linguists are still figuring out the rules. How could we possibly teach it? It has to be absorbed. When I got this question a couple of nights ago, I decided to find a complicated rule to give you as an example. So I went to Google and I wrote in complicated rules of English grammar. And I found a good one right away. Order of adjectives. You can say a
Wow.
big, beautiful, old white dog. You can say that. But you can't say a white, old, beautiful, big dog. There are strict rules for adjective order. I didn't know those rules. I didn't know this rule. I have a PhD in grammar. My graduate education was reading the works of Noam Chomsky and studying grammar. And I'm one of those crazy people. I love grammar. I didn't know this rule. I had never heard of it. Everyone listening knows the rule, but they can't state it. They have absorbed it. It was subconsciously acquired. It was acquired indirectly. The usual assumption in traditional language teaching is you first consciously learn the rules, and then you practice them over and over and get corrected, etc. And then someday, once you do this and you've mastered the rules, you can actually understand the language and use it. The causality is actually reversed. We have confused cause and effect. The cause is comprehensible input. The result is grammar, vocabulary, all these other things. So indirect and implicit grammar is the only way it can happen. I wouldn't, as I mentioned last time, I would never forbid grammar teaching, but we should understand that it's extremely limited. Last time when I talked about this, I said there are constraints on learning grammar consciously and actually using grammar as we speak and as we write. You've got to know the rule. That's hard. You've got to be thinking about form, which is very unnatural. And in conversation, you have to have time to do it. And the only time that happens is when you give people a grammar test. So grammar is very, very hard, difficult to apply. There are those people who are strange people who think grammar is interesting. I am one of them, okay? But that is not the way we acquire language. Related to this is the next question. In fact, it's the same question. What about correction? Let me give you a paper to look up since you have a lot of free time. Give you the name of someone. The guy's name is John Truscott, T-R-U-S-C-O-T-T, T-R-U-S-C-O-T-T. John Truscott is an American living in Taiwan, and I've known him for quite a few years. Since I read his first paper, I wrote him right away. And when I've been to Taiwan, I've always made sure I saw John Truscott. He's been doing, in my opinion, the best research on correction. If you type in John Truscott into Google, you will find several of his papers free that are posted. Please read them. He's talked about error correction in writing, error correction in conversation. None of it works. All the research, I've reviewed it as well. Truscott has done a beautiful job of reviewing it. It doesn't work. People who are heavily corrected, mildly corrected, no matter what, don't do any better than those who are not. With one exception, a few studies have shown an effect. Number one, the effect is very small. Number two, it only happens when the conditions for use of the monitor are met, for using conscious knowledge. And that's when you have time, when you've studied the rule, and when you're focused on form. In other words, when you take a grammar test, there's a little bit of effect for correction when you can actually use conscious grammar. It fades away, it's not very strong. So that takes care of that. That makes life a lot easier for us, I think. Oh boy, the next one, this is so interesting. I got to tell you the story of this one. How do we make sure that I+1 is covered? The answer came to me suddenly when I was driving. It was a long time ago. I was driving in the Southern California area It was on the Pasadena freeway that links downtown Los Angeles to Pasadena. It's Route 60. I remember the spot on the freeway. I had to stop the car and pull over because the idea just hit me. Here it was. If the input is comprehensible, and there's enough of it, I+1 is there. We don't have to worry about it. You don't have to insert it into texts. You don't have to say, what should the student acquire next? Let's give them exercises. Relax. It has to be that way. Otherwise, people would never acquire language. Example, we all know about vitamins, right? We're all very worried about whether we're getting enough vitamins. So this morning I took some extra vitamins. I took some vitamin C this morning just to make sure. Sometimes I take some B12, okay, because it's supposed to be good for you. So, okay, that's like consciously choosing what you're going to do. But there's another school of thought. It says that if you have a good diet and it's a balanced diet, all the vitamins are there. All the vitamins are there in the proper amount, and they come back over and over again. You don't make dinner because you want more vitamin B6, okay? You just have what you want to eat, and it's automatically there. If the food tastes good and there's a variety, of course, I don't believe in white sugar, of course, because that has no vitamins. But if it's reasonably good food and there's a reasonable variety, you are getting the vitamins you need. When you have a good diet, it's extremely rare to have a vitamin deficiency. The problem with the diet idea, the problem with the vitamin idea, we haven't yet discovered all the vitamins. Every year, there's a new vitamin you should be taking. I remember when people discovered selenium. That came out in the early 1980s. Suddenly there was this new mineral and everybody has a selenium deficiency. And we all went to the health food store and we bought selenium. What happened before it was discovered? People were getting selenium from food. Same thing here. We keep discovering new grammar rules. We acquired the rules before anyone discovered the rule, before anyone knew about it. So my hypothesis is, don't worry, it's there in the input. In my papers, I've cited some research that suggests this may be true, but the common sense of it is overwhelming to me. It has to be true, otherwise we would never acquire language. So I think that one's easy. I+1 is there. Okay, the next one. Wow, what a big one. Universal grammar. What about universal grammar? Again, we owe this to Noam Chomsky and his unbelievable research and impact. There's two kinds of universals. One kind are very specific. For example, all languages in the world have pronouns, okay? And some of them are rather abstract. The underlying principles of language are universal. The idea of recursion, embedding, all these things we learned about in our grammar classes, those things are universal as well. The theory is that universals makes the task of language acquisition easier. We are all prepared to acquire language. Take pronouns. The idea is when the child is acquiring his or her language, the child knows implicitly it's going to have pronouns. It may have different systems, but the pronouns will be there. It makes the task easier. It's a really wonderful common sense idea. I've been thinking a lot about this lately and going back and rereading Chomsky, which is always a good idea. He has said that the language acquisition device is like an organ, like the liver, like the kidneys. It's something we are born with, and it's the same in everybody. Isn't that wonderful? Now, like your liver and my liver are very similar. If we do tests on the liver, you may have a slightly more efficient liver because you don't drink as much alcohol or you're younger and stronger, but pretty much it's within a certain range, which leads me to the hypothesis that everyone is good at languages.
Yeah.
given the right kind of input, we're all going to do well. And with Benico Mason, we did a study and we found that if you give people really good input, interesting reading, their rate of acquisition is pretty similar. So given optimal input, we all do well. Given a good diet, our organs are in pretty good shape, all about the same. So I think this is a very appealing hypothesis and probably true. All organs are equipped with universals, and they cannot be controlled voluntarily. You cannot affect them by thinking about it. You can't make your liver more functional by doing mental exercises, okay? You can't turn it off by thinking about it. Same thing with language. Fascinating hypothesis. Dr. Ashtari, who's the guest at this lecture now, and I have been thinking about this for the last month, that we all acquire language and we all acquire it beautifully. And we acquire things we don't even want to acquire. It's not a question of willpower. It's not a question of desire. It's not a question of motivation. If you're motivated, you can't make your liver work any better. It has its own way of working and you can't affect it. So we cannot stop acquiring. I think that's closer to the truth. If you give people the right input that's comprehensible, that's very, very interesting, there's a lot of it, and it's rich. There's a lot of language there to help you acquire and understand. This is a hypothesis developed by Benico Mason. I think it's very, very powerful. If you get optimal input, we're going to acquire every aspect of language that's available to us, as long as it's the right kind of input. We acquire dialects of our own language we don't even want to. It's there within us. I want to give you some examples of this. Lots of possible ones. I'll give you two from my experience because you have had the same experience. When I was a young man, I lived in Ethiopia for 2 years. I was teaching, and I met a guy from the British Council, British Embassy, and his specialty was language, so we gossiped and talked. Gerald Mosbach was his name, and he told me the most amazing story that has been on my mind for the last 50 years. He studied French in high school, and the instruction was not very good. He hated French. He hated the teachers. He hated the method, very traditional. And they were forced to take an oral examination at the end, which is a good way of torturing teenagers, give them an oral test. He and his friends decided to show their hatred for the French language and culture. He decided to try to humiliate French and the entire French culture. They walked into the final examination dressed up French, with the beret. They overdid French mannerisms. They spoke with an exaggerated French accent. Ah, je vais très bien, monsieur. Comment allez-vous aussi? Hein? Ça va aujourd'hui? And they would never do that in real life. The instructors thought they were wonderful and gave them super high grades. In other words, they did things they would be embarrassed to do in real life. Another example, also from French. The British actor, Peter Ustinov, wonderful actor. He has been in movies in French, in the French language, playing the role of a French person. And I have seen him in these movies. I'm not that good in French. I'm not perfect. I'm okay. But he sounds French to me. And other people have said the same thing. He says when he's in the movies playing a role, he can do the accent, no problem. And he's comfortable. But in real life, when he's having a conversation in French, he can't do it. The conclusion this leads to, we have acquired these things, but we won't perform it because we feel we're not members of that group. This concept, which Dr. Ashtari and I have been talking about for the last month, the concept is club membership. originally comes from Frank Smith. Brilliant insight. We acquire a language more easily when we feel we are a member of the group. And sometimes you have to be invited into the club. Then you have the accent, then it comes easily. Then you're comfortable using the accent. So we have an output filter that blocks not our competence, but our performance. Deep inside of me is the perfect French accent. Deep inside of me, the languages I know, the perfect German accent. I don't use them because I'm not French. I'm not German. I feel a little bit silly, like it's not me. We call this the output filter. It's not competence, it's performance. Being able to perform your competence.
The output.
Pardon?
The output filter.
The output filter. That's why we don't have a perfect accent in our other languages. The field of acting has discovered this. About 6 years ago, we have a cousin. Her name is Shira. She's a famous actress in Israel. She's on one of the big TV programs and she's all over. Whenever I mention her name, people say, yeah, I know her. She's my cousin. Anyway, she visited us and she took acting class here in Los Angeles. We saw a lot of her. And she told me about method acting. Fascinating. It turns out that the good actors today, Marlon Brando, was a product of method acting. In method acting, you don't have to act. You find the character inside of you that's already there. A famous anecdote. The woman a famous actress is about to play a role in which she's really angry. She goes to the director and says, slap me across the face hard. He says, what? Just do it. So he does. She gets very angry. Then she can play the role. She knows how to be angry. It's hard to imitate it. You have to find the anger feeling. Remember a time of your life when you were angry. That's eliminating the output filter. So I have a hunch that actors have found a way of doing this, which is why they're so good at what they do. And I've also discovered that actors are generally people who've had a lot of life experience. I always thought that actors were just, performers, nothing there. Then I read an autobiography by one of the world's great actors, Sidney Poitier, and I was astonished at the richness of his life experiences and the insight he had into his roles. Excellent philosophy, etc. This is method acting. They know how to call up those feelings, and they must have rich life experience to do it. Well, there's a couple more topics. I hope we have time for them. I'm only going to go another 3 hours. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, just a few more minutes. One came up about deadlines, and I've looked at the research on deadlines. What happens when you have deadlines? We give students deadlines. You must get this in, etc. Let me quote famous philosopher Ram Dass, R-A-M-D-A-S. Ram Dass is from the United States. His name is Richard Alpert. He had mystical experiences, went to India, studied with a guru, and became a wonderful spiritual teacher. Absolutely amazing. And he talked about the idea of hurrying, and he said it very clearly. If you have one eye on your work, if you have one eye on the clock and one eye on your work will suffer. The trick with deadlines is to forget them. I'm going to make this a little more complicated. It's not quite that simple. We have deadlines. I want people to meet their deadlines. The way to meet the deadlines is to temporarily forget it. Focus on what you're doing right now. Pretend the rest of it doesn't exist. Then you get done faster and you can go on to the next task. I go through this every morning, just as you do. I make a list of the things I have to do, and it looks impossible. We all go through this. I take the task that really needs to be done, and I make a real effort to pretend the other ones don't exist. Then I can focus on that task. I can get it done. If I'm worried about the deadlines, my work is much slower, etc. You have to pretend. And I've seen papers on good writers, they all do this. They pretend the deadline is not there, at least so they can focus on the next task. And that's the one they worry about, only the one that comes next. There's a wonderful book called Bird by Bird. Forgot the author's name, I'm sorry. It's about a female writer, and she's talking about her dad in the introduction. And she says, I remember one time when my brother, who was 10 years old, had an assignment in school. He had to do a report on birds, trace the birds, what were they? And he was like 10 years old, 11 years old. The night before it was due, he hadn't even started. Supposed to be 1 month project. And there was the table filled with all these books about birds. He hadn't even opened them. And he was in tears. His father sat down next to him, put his arm around his son and said, son, bird by bird, do them one at a time and forget the rest. Believe me, I think about this every morning when I start to work. Don't worry about all the stuff, ignore the deadlines. Finally, a wonderful question about collaboration. Should we collaborate? The answer is clear, yes and no. Mostly no. A little collaboration can be great. I would call this optimal collaboration. The problem with collaboration is that we force it in classes. There was something in the United States about 10 years ago called cooperative learning. It was the fad. And they would set up the classroom in small groups of desks facing each other. The children were forced to collaborate on everything they did. No, it's a huge waste of time. How do you collaborate? Here are the steps I think are the right ones. Number one, most of your ideas will come from yourself, not from other people. Look at your previous work. Good thinkers get most of their ideas from themselves, not from others. In fact, Peter Elbow, one of my heroes in writing work, says the first thing you do when you don't know what to do next, start writing. Just start writing down your ideas. As you do that, you'll get new ideas. Once you've done that, then you collaborate. You start reading to see what other people have done. Or my friends are very annoyed with me. I call them up and say, I got this idea. What do you think? Okay. And then I can talk about it because I've thought about it myself. When you collaborate at that moment, when I call up my colleagues and they say, oh God, now what? That's when it counts. Because my colleagues always push me along a little bit farther, and I'm prepared for their reactions. Okay. Nishan, if we're listening, I got an email. You got a copy from Lucy Tsay yesterday, which was just wonderful. She doesn't give many comments when she does. I had posed a question. They were absolutely just right, what I needed to hear. But I don't write her every day. I don't call her every moment. Okay. This is how collaboration works. Let me call it optimal collaboration. Okay, Nishan, I'm going to call you again this afternoon. You can bet on it. I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll be some.
I look forward to it. And I completely agree with all the collaborators and the colleagues.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. So collaboration, they're right about sometimes it takes time. I've collaborated with Frank Smith quite a bit over the years. I can't do it too much because he's too smart. He's too good. I remember one time I went up to Canada just to spend a couple of days with him, just to be with Frank, okay? He gave me so many ideas. I wrote them down. I avoided him for the next 6 weeks because I was straightening it out. And that's what he meant. That's what he meant. So the kind of collaboration we're looking for is optimal collaboration. It's not being forced into the same room with a bunch of other kids who don't know what they're thinking yet either. It's premature collaboration. But when you need it and your colleagues are there, even if they simply restate what you said, it always gets clearer. So I'm in favor of collaboration, but it's optimal and it's not full time all the time every day driving people crazy. I think Nushan is
Yes.
going to get an unlisted phone number soon. I got this idea. I got this idea.
Absolutely not. And it goes both ways because
You
as
bet it
you said,
does. You bet.
exactly.
I mean, if it wasn't for you, I
But
wouldn't have published anything. I got all these ideas, which I stole from you. This is great.
Absolutely.
Collaboration for senior
by the way, I
scholars.
think you are
You
great
do the work, you
collaborator.
get the credit. This is wonderful.
Yes.
Absolutely. And
By
I
the way,
think
I think you are great collaborators. I see a lot of work, a lot of papers. You know,
Oh, it's wonderful. It's been fabulous. I would say probably more than half of my papers are co-authored.
really.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And, you know, this is really sad because I have a lot of colleagues who are at this level where they're up for promotion to associate professor. And some of them have told me the committee looked at my work and said, there's too much co-authored. You're second author. You should be first author or not at all. No, I think if you're the fifth author of a paper with 5 authors, that deserves a lot of credit.
Yes.
That means you have contributed to the group enterprise. So this part is really the essence of academic life. I have been really blessed with co-authors. It's been absolutely wonderful and continues to be so. Thank you, Nisha. Okay.
thank you.
By the
And
way,
I
there is. Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
go ahead, please.
Okay. By the way, I see there is a paper which is the wear and tear study,
Oh yes.
which contains the unobtrusive measures, the central table hypothesis. I really was trying to think about this to see how can we link this to writing research papers, especially the central table hypothesis. And I think you guys did something about this, right? A study or
Well,
something.
Nishan did a paper on it. I was the author too, and it was about reading. How much do people really read? And
Oh,
it's
really?
what you call what's the word I'm looking for? Unobtrusive measure.
Measures. Exactly.
Unobtrusive research is fabulous. Unobtrusive research costs you nothing, and you don't take people's time. There's a book called Unobtrusive Measures. In my favorite study, you know what I'm going to talk about, yeah, there it is. Thank you. Unobtrusive
Yes.
measures. Good.
Can we have a copy?
Of course, it's. I don't know if you can
Unobtrusive
see it.
measures. Yeah,
Okay, yes,
Gene
yes.
Webb.
My color.
One of the studies they talked about was an automobile dealer in Chicago. And the car he was selling was Chevrolets. In those days, very popular.
Yes.
And the automobile dealer who wanted to sell more cars wanted to know what radio stations they should advertise on. So what do? Do a survey, bother people? No. He went into the garage at his part where they repair cars. He asked the mechanics to look to see where the radio dial was set. Then you found the radio stations where people who drive Chevrolets, those are the ones they listen to. Unobtrusive. For us today, when we're overworked and we don't have a lot of research money, get the book that Dr. Ashtari just held up. Unobtrusive Measures. I promise you, you will read it like an interesting novel. It is so entertaining. It's a new
Yes.
way of doing research that doesn't bother anybody and costs nothing.
Exactly. And I really like the example of museums. Before there were electronic tickets, they would see the popular exhibits by how the tiles looked and how many people went to the specific exhibition in a museum because there were the wear and tear of the tiles on the floor. So that meant that
Exactly.
and in
Exactly.
our fields, that would be, for example, the wear and tear study that you mentioned, Mr. Sobai, I believe. Is that your?
Yes.
Okay,
So,
I hope exactly. Is that what we did with heritage languages, especially Farsi? We went to libraries and took out books that were for parsing instruction. And then we looked at what page was the last page that the readers actually read to see how popular the books were and how useful they actually were to see how much of these books have actually been read. And what is interesting is that even with books that you have at home, but it's more significant with libraries because so many people take out these books, you can actually see that if there are any smudges, any wrinkles, any tears on pages, or any tea or coffee stains, then you can see the last page. And it turned out that it was only 5% of the books were read, so they were not really helpful. So yeah, just to add an example to other examples, it's a very, very interesting research.
There was another famous study like that. The book was A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking.
Hawking, yes.
Yeah, which I tried to read and it was too hard. Okay.
Right.
I have a background in science, but still, what they did, when they sold them in the stores, they put a little piece of paper in it. And they said, if you get this far, contact us. We'll send you a check for $10. Hardly anybody did it. They didn't get that far.
Wow, that is amazing. I didn't know that one.
Let me mention another way of being unobtrusive. And this is something we get criticized for, but it's actually a very good idea if you do it right. What our colleague Beniko Mason has done is combine her research with her work as running an English program in Japan. I did this too, and I learned how to do this from John Aller, who was my professor then, who was magnificent. When John Aller was the head of the English ESL program at his university, actually it was UCLA, every time there was a final exam, he did an experiment with exam papers. That meant that the exam was done as carefully as could be. The tests were reliable and valid. The students didn't know it was a test. It did not affect them. Beniko Mason has done the same thing with her students in Japan when students have had focused on self-selected reading, hearing stories. The students were not only not harmed, they didn't know it was a study. And the research, the data is clean and interesting. So unobtrusive could be part of a program as long as the students are not harmed in any way, no extra time. The teachers don't have to, you should tell the teachers, but the teachers don't have to put in any extra work. So this is what we're looking for. You will not get a big grant proposal for it because it doesn't cost anything. So these are the new directions.
Okay, I think the idea maybe behind the unobtrusive studies is that you don't bother people, and because actually when you bother people, this may affect the study, the nature of the study.
Yes, the observer's paradox.
Yes, there is attention. People, for example, when you ask them to complete a questionnaire or to complete something, there is certain choices and etc. This makes them a little bit nervous and not excited. But when you do it indirectly, you get clean and interesting results, as you have said.
Much more likely, yes. And we really have to think about doing more of this these days when money is so tight.
Yes.
And people don't have time. We don't want to bother them.
And it also minimizes their effective output filter.
Right, whichever.
Filter. Yeah. Whichever.
The output filter and they are the same, maybe. The effective filter and the output filter.
Now you're stimulating me to tell you something that's premature. I wonder if we need the input filter. I don't know. Do we need the affective filter? In terms of science, you want to use the minimum amount of mechanism in your theory. You don't want to add things you don't need. This is the principle of Occam's razor, O-C-C-A-M-S. The idea is the theory that's the simplest is probably the most correct. So if we don't need the affective filter, that's actually good. If the output filter will take care of it, I don't know yet, but it's something that we're looking out for. Do we actually need the input filter? I still don't know.
Effective filter, true.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I told you before that we are trying to apply your ideas, especially in writing, and writing is really my favorite thing. Uh, we are trying to apply your ideas, writing short papers, but I don't really understand the central table hypothesis. I still didn't get it to make the paper short.
Would you restate the question? You got cut off.
The central table hypothesis.
Okay, central table. This is for all papers that have research in them, where you're doing a quantitative analysis. My hypothesis is in every well-written paper, there is one table that tells you the whole story. And when I write a paper, I put together the central table first. Let's say we're doing two groups and it's about reaction time. And one group has 3 cups of coffee and the other has no coffee. And you do a reaction time study. Well, then you'll have a column, plus coffee, minus coffee, pre-test, post-test, reaction time. That will be a 2x2 table. That's what you do first. And when I pick up a paper, before I read it, once I know what the hypothesis is, I look for the central table first. Then I know the results, because authors, they want to keep you in suspense. They don't even tell you the hypothesis until you've read 3 pages, and you don't know the conclusion until you're nearly on the last page. And I get too curious. I like to look at that table right away. And when I write, that's the first thing I do. I write up the central table. Then the supporting tables, what the subjects were, then the method. The last thing you do is the introduction.
Yes.
So that makes life easy. Now, in a non-empirical paper, when it's a philosophical paper or literature review, the first thing I try to do is state the conclusions simply. And the main evidence for them, I write that part first, because it's like the central table. And I think it's a good hypothesis that every good paper has one big idea in it. And that's all.
Yes. You mentioned before that correction doesn't work. Sometimes, does that mean teachers should correct at certain times or avoid correction at all? Because it doesn't work, especially in grammar.
Well, if you're going to correct it all, the only
true.
time, yeah.
And that's true, because we correct and students keep making the same mistake.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because they're human beings. We are forcing them to consciously learn what they have not acquired, and that's hard to do. In fact, it's nearly impossible. We have to let them read more and acquire more gradually over time. However, let me give you the exception. In every language, there are some rules that nobody acquires, ever. For example, in English, I would say half of the people who write English fluently, like all of us in this group, there's certain things we make mistakes on, like there and there, ERE, the apostrophe and all that. It's and it's, ITS, IT apostrophe S, little tiny things. These are places where the language is changing. And we're caught in the middle of grammatical change. Those we have to get right, even if we haven't acquired them, because it doesn't look good unless we do. We can't wait for language change. So what I do when I write a paper, when it's all done, at the end, I use the spell check, I use the grammar check, and it shows me just those places where the language has changed, these rules that are kind of in between that I'm not quite sure of. When you get a spell check, by the way, or grammar check, what they do is they give you several options and you choose one. You always know which one is right, which means you've partially acquired it, but not completely. So with that final editing, that part, you can use it, but it won't help. You'll only get that paper. You'll improve that paper, but you won't learn it that way. You'll have to look it up again next week when you write another paper.
Yes, that was excellent. You said when we feel we are a member of a group, we learn better. We learn languages easily when we are a member of a group. That means immersion. When you immerse yourself in the language, you surround yourself with people, with TV, with cartoons, and you learn better or you learn easily.
Yes and no. Mostly no. Benico Mason has just completed 2 papers on this, 3 actually. I've been co-author of some of them. And what she does in those papers is take an individual, usually a student of English who lives in Japan, and compare their growth when they've just done lots of reading and time when they've lived in another country. One of her papers, a young lady, student of English, took a year off, and she was already intermediate in English, not bad. She spent a year living with a family, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a friendly family speaking English. She had a job in which she used English all the time, and she took subject matter classes in English. She did not improve at all. She then went back to Japan, spent a semester doing lots of pleasure reading, made a huge gain. It's optimal input that counts. If you're in a country and you're talking to people, you're using the same language every day. It's the same stuff. How are you? Fine. How's your mom? Did you like the dessert? Blah, blah, blah. You're not growing from that. So it's not always optimal input. It doesn't always contain what you need. So immersion by itself, no. When immersion contains optimal input, yes. I had a year of immersion in Austria, and it worked. I got much better in German, but I read all the time. My other foreigners, we exchanged books in German. We found good authors. We had friends who were German. We spoke German a lot, but we did a lot of reading, absolutely. And I think that made the difference. I would have made progress had I stayed home and just read those books.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for those interesting answers. You mentioned in the previous webinars a book which is called The Art of Thought. The Art of Thought. Do you have this book? I would like
Somewhere,
to read it.
Graham Wallace is the author. Oh yeah, I have it in my files somewhere. I should really put it on PDF if I were really a nice guy. That's what I would do. I'll see if I can. First I have to find it. You know how that is.
Yes.
That's good. Graham Wallace was wonderful. This was published in the 1920s.
If you have it, you can send it to me, please, okay?
I will make it freely available. I'm sure that it's okay to do that now.
Yes, okay.
Okay, I just have something, a question actually about little children that I teach usually. They come to me very young in age, KG 4 or 5. How do I use language with them? I don't want to rush them to speak as you do, but should I use their native Arabic with them and English together, or what? How should I start?
Well, the easy way, use the first language.
Yeah.
Tell them lots of stories all the time. Delicious, wonderful stories. And they'll get interested in reading. Once they get interested in reading, they will accomplish everything. Once they're fanatic readers and they love books and stories, it's the key to everything. First language, second language, etc. So then when it's time to do second language, they'll have no problem. I would focus on first language and lots of wonderful, delicious reading.
Thank you.
Easy way.
Okay.
Sandwiching, I think she means sandwiching or something. It's a technique maybe when you
Sandwiching.
combine. Yes.
I wouldn't worry about that. I would just make sure it's interesting and exciting. I wouldn't make it. We have those too. We have bilingual books. People love them. They love them and they never read them. One side of the page is French, one side is English, sandwich.
Yes.
No, people don't like to do that. They want to know the story. They don't want to compare
problem.
the grammar.
Yeah, we use these, but they really aren't interested, and usually just focus on the one they can understand.
You got it. Thank you. That's it. That is shukram. That's exactly right.
Okay, the sandwiching technique is not working because...
No, it never has. It's also called concurrent translation. And that has never worked. And that means do it in one language and say it again in the other one. We want meaning. We want the interesting meaning. We don't need to get things translated.
It's,
Even if students don't understand. Yes, go ahead.
No, it needs to be comprehensible. Our job is to help make text comprehensible, help make stories comprehensible.
Yes.
For that, I recommend Benico Mason's work, benicomason.net, benico-mason.net, how to make stories comprehensible. Storytelling is everything.
Yes. Okay.
well, what about older students? They already know the language, but is it okay to use the first language in my sessions?
Of course, the more the better, always. The more they read in the first language, the more an active intellectual life, yes. What has happened to you and what has happened to me, I think is the way to go. We all had wonderful background in our first language. When we got interested in another language, after the initial stages, we started reading for pleasure. We had a reading habit already in our first language.
It's true. I really like reading all of them.
Well, I read in other languages as much as I can. It's hard to find books, but I read in French, I read in Spanish a lot. Once I can find the book, and I'm looking for the topic, not because it's in another language. And you want it to be so interesting, you get lost in the book, you forget that it's another language, and my languages are all getting better all the time from the reading. I'm getting lost in the books. That's what we want to do.
By the way, have you read some of the comic books I sent you?
Not yet. I'm sorry. I've been overwhelmed lately, but I will.
Yes.
See, I can speak Arabic already.
Yes, thank you. So they include a lot of pictures, as I told you.
That's great. That's wonderful. That's a dream come true, let me tell you, to do Arabic. That would be wonderful.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you so much for answering our question. This session was unfortunately not live, but we can meet in another live session,
Okay.
in another topic. Maybe the power of reading or the natural approach. I really love the natural approach.
I think we're doing better now. I think we've gone beyond natural approach. I love it too. For its time, it was a huge step forward, invented by Tracy Terrell, who was a brilliant teacher. I really admired him. But I think what we're doing now is better. And for that, I would look at Benico Mason's website. You know, the combination of story listening combined with self-selected reading.
Yes,
that to me is magic. I think she's actually got it.
Okay. Okay. So we will meet in another live session.
Just one last thing. I'm sorry. It's about the bilingual education. Are you for against? Because we have a little bit of war here against it.
Always. I know that. When it's done right, it is fantastic. What bilingual education does when it's done right is to use the first language to make the second language more comprehensible. That's the idea. So a child comes to school speaking only, let's say, the home language, speaking only Berber, and you want him to know classical Arabic or whatever. You begin with teaching school in the first language as much as you can. You do language arts in the first language, subject matter teaching, and you do a little bit of second language. In English, English is a second language, okay? Then gradually you increase the amount of subject matter taught in the second language. The more reading they do, when they become readers in their home language, they know more about the world. Things will be more comprehensible. Let me invite you to go to my website and look at the bilingual education page or the section of articles. We had major wars on bilingual education here in the United States. I was in the middle of them. Oh my God. One of the things I'm most proud of is that I was criticized in an editorial in the Wall Street Journal. Can you imagine? The most famous economic newspaper in the world. My mother was so excited. My son in the Wall Street Journal. They said there's this crazy professor in California who thinks that if you teach things in Spanish, you'll get better in English. How could that be true? That's nonsense. That just shows how crazy the universities are. Well, it's actually true. If you do it right, and you give children a good education in their first language, the world becomes more comprehensible. You understand more. It's not how much second language you hear, it's how much of it is comprehensible. And we have good research that shows that when you do it right, bilingual education does better than all English immersion. So bilingual education, when it's done right, it's not just how much you hear, it's how much of it is comprehensible. And it gives you more comprehensible input. The war is not over on that one. It's still being fought everywhere, and I'm still writing papers on it, presenting papers on it, etc. But it does work when it's done right.
Yeah.
Maybe the war, they are starting the war because they want to make English as an international language. No, they don't want other languages. Maybe that's
Well, that's true, and they're actually right in a sense. The fact that English is so dominant in the world today is a two-edged sword, as we say. It's very good, first half, because now Korea can talk to Poland. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
It is the international language. The war there is over. English has won, no question. And that is very good for world peace, understanding, and international business. However, we don't want to sacrifice the national languages, the rich cultures, the rich philosophies, and the advantages of being bilingual. So we want both. So that's why we're very interested in what Dr. Ashtari has called heritage language development. We're quite concerned that in the Los Angeles area, where there's a huge population of families from Iran, that the children get a little bit of Farsi when they're young, and then it's gone. By the time they're in elementary school in the 6th grade, they can hardly talk to their grandparents in Farsi. We don't want that. And we want them to all read, understand, and appreciate Rumi in the original. Okay, there's a rich culture, literature, all this. We want both. That's the idea. And I think we can do it.
Dr. Ashtari is not here.
I'll tell her later. Oh, there she is.
Yes. I was sure. Absolutely. And we see the benefit, the parents see the benefits, the children see the benefits, the teachers see the benefits, everyone sees the benefit if bilingual education is done right, as Professor Krashen said. And it's not in just one single language, it's in all heritage languages and languages in general. It's definitely an important topic that needs to be discussed more and more and more. I believe among scholars, teachers, parents, children, everyone. And it's an easy fix. It's not that it's not the most complicated thing in the world. If we make them comprehensible, both languages can thrive and grow. It's just that there are forces having a tug of war.
There's misunderstandings. Yeah.
Yes.
I think there are some similarities between Farsi language and Arabic. I don't understand Farsi, but when I listen to people speak Farsi, I pick up some. I understand the context.
Yes, we have a lot of cognates in common, and we have the same writing system, and we have a lot of borrowed words, both from Farsi, Arabic, and French. So it's definitely two languages that kind of sometimes coincide together.
Okay, thank you so much for this great session. Do you have any final comment, Professor Stephen, about all this?
Comprehensible input, that's my advice. Get plenty of sleep and don't eat a lot of junk food. How's that for advice?
Yes, great one.
Good.
I actually...
And coffee.
And coffee, drink coffee. Thank you.
Coffee, yes. That's the best advice ever. But junk
or
food...
tea.
Huh?
Tea?
Oh, no, sorry. Coffee.
No, we drink tea. We drink a lot of tea here in Morocco. And we really drink coffee. Yes.
Oh, I'm addicted. What can I do? Positive addiction.
So you Stephen, you promised me something, remember?
What did I promise you?
After the COVID, you will visit Morocco.
What are we going to do after COVID? We're going to I'm coming to Morocco. We're going to hang out. Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not? That was a good idea.
I wish. This has been so strange these times. Yes.
No, I will send you the invitation.
Good. You talk.
No, you talk.
Things will get better in about 2 months after the American elections.
Oh, yeah.
Or worse.
Has to.
Okay, yes. We hope better future for the American people.
Oh, for everybody. Everybody. This affects everybody.
Yes, for everyone, yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashtari, do you have any comment? Final comment?
No, I think everything was so clear and interesting as always, and I'm really looking forward to the next ones.
Yes,
So-
the next one will go live. This one was not live, but the next one will go live, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay,
Inshallah.
thank you so much for this great session, Professor Stephen. Thank you, Dr. Ashtari. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
our audience. And we will meet soon, inshallah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I had a good time.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
And